Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we're going to check out another of these Roar Striker figures, as this time we have the Triceratops. This one is one of probably the least exciting of these new Roar Striker figures, but it's still another new figure, not one of the best by no means, but it looks good for what it is from what I can tell so far, even though we have had about a bajillion Triceratops already. You know, I'm still okay with more. I'm really interested in getting this one out, taking a look at it, and seeing how the new action feature works, especially after checking out the Scorpiovinator. But as far as, again, the box art goes, you have your standard Jurassic World Dominion box art. And then here on the back of the box, we yet again have the other figures in the line, as well as a sneak peek of how the action feature works there for the Triceratops. So let's pop this out of the box and check it out. So here is the new Triceratops, and I'm not too sure if this one really sculpt-wise is any different from the previous Triceratops. I'm going to bring another one in here in just a moment to kind of compare and contrast to see if it looks different. I will say I don't remember the tail being so long, but maybe it was. Maybe it's just been a little while since I've taken a look at one. But, you know, the paint job is pretty lackluster, I will say. It looks good as far as the tones of color used, but there's like so little paint for this one. Like, this is probably one of the least painted Triceratops that we've had. Like, you can see as far as the face goes, we have like this brownish color running up and over, and then the green, and that's really it. We have that up here on the back, same deal, running to about the hip region, disappears completely. There's no nail paint or anything like that. So the paint job is definitely like your bare minimum, almost what I would expect to see on a basic Triceratops if we got one of those. But the sculpt does look really nice, so it overall is still a nice looking Triceratops, but of course paint-wise it could be better. And then again, comparing it with a previously released Triceratops, here is one of the previously released ones, which again, the paintwork does look actually about the same, because you just have one tone of color up here, one tone of color down there, some up on the face, but I think this one still is a little bit more visually appealing. But the sculpt does look a little bit different, I can say that. You can see the head sculpt looks pretty similar, trying to decipher any like significant differences that I can notice on this one compared to the original one. Yeah, I'm not really picking up on anything except for the size of this one might be increased a little bit over the previous one. But I can say straight away that I notice a little bit of difference in the legs. This front leg is outstretched more than this leg. This leg is curved into the body a bit more. And when it comes to the rear leg, it almost looks like a similar situation. I think maybe the rear leg might be the same. Let's go ahead and turn them around. I don't know how good the differences are picking up on camera, but here in person, I can definitely see some slight differences. I think that these legs on this side might be pretty much the same, except this leg is stretched back more, whereas this leg is kind of standing upright more. So it seems like maybe they've just given us some difference in the leg sculpts, but the majority of the sculpt overall definitely looks to be pretty much the same. We have different tail articulation, though. You can see that we had, you know, the ability to move the tail left and right, whereas we don't have that on the newer ones. So there are some similarities, some differences. You can see, though, that the Triceratops is pretty much the same size as all of the previous Triceratops figures. But anyway, let's go ahead and jump straight to a closer look right now. So now that we've seen that the sculpts are pretty much the same, we don't really need to go over too much when it comes to the sculpts of the figure. The sculpt overall looks like, again, the same figure as previously, but the legs look like they're a little bit different. However, I don't think they're different enough that we really need to, you know, get any closer of a look at them. You can see that they look really nice. Again, it's your usual very high quality sculpt on a Mattel release, but they just look like they're just ever so slightly different compared to the previous ones. But what we really need to take a look at again would be the paintwork, and that's really the only thing different aside from the action feature. So you can see as far as the beak goes, we have kind of like a light yellow. We have that same coloration for the nasal horn, and then the same coloration for the horns up here, and it looks pretty good. It plays off of the greenish tones of color fairly nicely. You can see that we have a yellow eye, but the eye looks absolutely horrible because rather than a black pupil, we've done that same stupid thing that we do usually where we give it like the pupil is the coloration of the main body, and in this instance it's a green. I really cannot stress enough to Mattel not to do that. It looks terrible, doesn't look good on this figure at all, and really takes away from the figure as a whole. Definitely hate the coloration of the eye. It would have been nice if it had a black pupil, but it looks terrible because of that green pupil. Leading up, though, into the frill of our Triceratops, you can see that nice variation of brown. It kind of follows along the outer edge of the frill and then sort of like trickles down and leaks down through the course of the frill. We also have the spikes that run along the frill itself are painted again with that same yellowish tone that we have for the horns up there on the head. And you can see the same for the back of those spikes. You can see, though, once we move up here, that we again have more of that brown kind of designing down from the upper side of the dinosaur, just kind of like splotching and then striping down. It allows that green to kind of stripe through, which looks pretty cool. But again, as usual, that paintwork stops dead right here around the hip region, and then we have absolutely nothing out here onto the tail aside from speckles. I do see kind of like a black speckling. It's really not that abundant. Like, you can see it pretty good here in the front leg. But again, it's at least a little bit of color difference. There is no paint for the nails, but they do seem to have a bit of a gloss coat to them, which is a little bit of a plus. No coloration for the underside at all. So again, when it comes to this figure, it is as basic as it gets when it comes to paintwork. There's just very little to be found on this figure, and overall, it's just not a very good paint job. It looks nice as far as the tones go, I will say that, but it just really needed more to be any type of a standout figure. So because of that, it just kind of falls in line with all of the previous Triceratops that we've had in the past. As far as the articulation goes, we do have both legs, of course. You can see forward and back. Doesn't move too much, but it does go. And then we have the rear leg, which actually moves really far. We can go all the way up if we choose to on this one. The legs sort of move out away from the body a little bit, but not much. We also have a swivel tail on the Triceratops, but that doesn't really do much for us. We have the Jurassic Facts app code up here. I'm going to have to take it out of the frame for just a second to get a hold of it, but there is the Jurassic logo on one side. Now that it's roaring on me, but there is the app code here on the other side if you'd like to scan that for your collection. It's another one of those moments where it is extremely visible, not well hidden, like some figures have done a decent job on hiding it. This one, not so much. But again, we do also have articulation in the neck, but that is going to activate the action feature. And if I pull that up, it's going to make that roar noise again. So it's actually kind of like the Pentaceratops, I will say that, where the head just dangles, which I'm not a big fan of. I like having posability in the neck where I can kind of lift it up and stuff like that. But considering the action feature and what you would expect for a Triceratops, it makes sense to have it like that. So we'll go ahead and do that. Some of those noises sound a little bit like a T-Rex to me, not so much a Triceratops, but it's hard to really tell because they kind of have it all blended together. Again, the action feature works really nicely. It's a nice way to activate it because there's no obnoxious buttons or anything, but that would be great for this figure if it didn't have the obnoxious scan code up there. Regardless, it works very nicely. The head goes up really far, so it does go up pretty high. And when it comes to a playability standpoint, that's like perfect for a Triceratops. As far as the size goes, again, it's pretty much the exact same size as you usually get for a Triceratops. So right around the 12-inch range, or about 30.5 centimeters. And then for a height to the top of the frill, you're looking at about a little over 4¼ inches, closing in at 4.5 inches, or right around the 10.5 centimeter area. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovisaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line in comparison to our Roar Strikers Triceratops. And you can again see that this is really no different when it comes to a size. It pretty much falls right in the same size range as all of the previous Triceratops. And at this point, if you are a Mattel Jurassic World collector, I would like to think you've got a pretty good idea already of the size of this figure. So this is probably one of the more boring releases of the Mattel Jurassic World Dominion line, and I might actually say this is the most boring one that I've been able to pick up yet. That's, again, not saying it's a bad figure, because it's not. It's not great, but it's not bad. It's a beautiful sculpt, insanely highly detailed, as most Mattel sculpts usually are, and really nicely replicates a Jurassic World-style Triceratops. The paint job, though, is, what you would expect something new and flashy to be on a Triceratops if we aren't getting a brand new resculpt, which this does have a little bit of resculpting to it. But the paint job is just so lackluster and nothing incredible, nothing important, or nothing even all that nice. The tones of color used are pretty decent. They're not great, but they're not flashy enough that it's going to be like, wow, that's a great looking Triceratops. It's just kind of generic tones, as we have brown and green. The design that they've chosen is pretty much your standard, also kind of a lazy design as far as the coloration goes. And the only thing that's really cool or worthwhile about this Triceratops is the fact that we have a really neat looking action feature that has a nice way to activate it. But as a whole, I would say this is probably the weakest Triceratops we've had, or at least one of the weakest Triceratops that we've had from Mattel so far. So, not that great of a figure. We had an amazing Scorpiovenator, well, pretty darn nice Scorpiovenator, which also suffered from a generic paint application, but again, this one here isn't quite as exciting as the Scorpiovenator, though if you do want to pick this up, you can again find this at Walmart or probably Target once Sunday hits. And again, a huge thank you goes out to my good friend Matthew, who hooked me up with this, with the Scorpiovenator, helping me to get a hold of this figure a little bit earlier rather than fighting scalpers for it in my area. So if you are interested, make sure you check your local Walmart, and make sure you also like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.